The Centre for Economic Development and Transformation has called for changes to South Africa's mining policies and laws. The Centre proposed a slew of changes to the regulatory rules governing the mining industry. Joining me to talk about all of this is economist Duma Kubule. Good afternoon. Thanks very much for coming in.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Very good, Duma. I'm quite interested in your thoughts on the matter, because the new report, South African Mining at the Crossroads, has called for 25% public ownership of mineral resources, in addition to the 26% legislated BEE ownership requirement. That's in the mining charter. What does this translate to in terms of the fiscus?
Let's unpack it. So what I'm calling for is 25% public ownership on behalf of the people of South Africa of our mineral resources. The most important thing in this debate that gets lost is that the mineral resources belong to all South Africans, black and white. A BEE deal, no matter how you structure it, will benefit a minority of South Africans. Therefore, because it is publicly owned, we must have a public benefit from these mineral resources. So what I've done in terms of the research that I did, I found out that there's existing 15% public ownership via the State Pension Fund and the IDC. 15% is owned by South Africans in the mining industry. So the shortfall to achieve the 25% target is 10%. So that is not a large number. It is about 50 billion rands to achieve the 25% targets. But what I believe is that we have to have three mechanisms to be able to increase domestic ownership and control of this mining industry. The first one, we should seed the assets that are currently in the Public Investment Commissioners Corporation into a sovereign wealth fund, and the assets of the IDC. That's number one. Number two, I do think that we should set up a public mining company that will have majority stakes in companies over time. That'll take a bit longer. The third thing, I do believe that we should have a national mining champion. And what I say in the report, I believe that the restructuring of Anglo American, South Africa's largest company, provides us with an opportunity to create this national mining champion. And what I say is that the PIC currently owns 13.3% of Anglo American. So if we had to have a geographic unbundling of Anglo American, the PIC would end up with 27% of this company. And they would do a top up with miners, communities, they would do a top up with workers and your BE investors, and achieve 51% domestic ownership of Anglo American. I think in terms of Anglo American, since they were listed in 1999, the value of the company today at the end of December 2016 and the value 18 years ago at listing was exactly the same, about $20 billion. So I think the management of the company over the last two odd decades, they haven't shown the ability to add value to their investments, and I think it's time for Anglo American to come home.
Very interesting. Now, lots of, I would say, contentious points in the proposal itself, but that's for a different discussion. My questions to you right now was, do you not have fears about how this money would be deployed in governance and controls in government at the moment?
That's a very good question, but our public sector is not in the best state, but luckily I do believe that the PIC is it's a well-managed company, and what I'm calling for is the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund by the same people who are managing those assets at the PIC and the IDC. These are well-managed companies, so it's not a blanket case that the entire public sector is in chaos. There are some pockets of excellence in the public sector. So I say on day one, to increase transparency of the sovereign wealth fund, I do believe it can be listed on the JSE. You have a similar arrangement in Ghana, so it is transparent and everybody knows. But I'm not sure about the technical details of how to work. Yeah.
Okay, so now here's what I'd want to find out from you, though. What can you tell us about how we actually achieve that equitable distribution of the proceeds for the benefit of the general public and all South Africans?
I think one of the things that hasn't been looked at is the role of host communities. Let's start with employees. In our report, we found that on the end date of the charter, there was zero net ownership by employees. That is a shocking statistic. And then we found that there was 2.4% ownership by communities. And of that 2.4%, 92% is owned by two communities. So one of the sad things when I did this report that I found is how there is no benefit to communities. So what I'm suggesting in terms of that is that we should have 7.5% of the BE portion for employees and 7.5% for the communities. And I believe that there should be a 50% free carry for those components of the ownership.
Duma, thank you so much for coming through to chat to us. I think there's a lot more that needs to be covered, because it is certainly groundbreaking that you've come up with these proposals. Yes, it's been spoken about in corridors of power, but it's the first time that I come across a report that is so detailed. Duma Kubule, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you very much.
Yes, there you have it, Duma Kubule, the author of South African Mining at the Crossroads, calling for a new way of looking at redistribution of wealth in the mining industry.